sacrifices, while they do transform our economy into a incredible war machine, at the same time, it does change the way Americans have to live their lives. I mean, those the wants and needs that Americans have are going to have to be sacrificed, and that's going to even include civil rights. We're going to set up internment camps, for example, to put Japanese Americans in. We're going to ration. We're going to force Americans to really fend for themselves in some ways for even food production. We're going to see Americans asked to give up their money to support the war effort by buying war bonds. All kinds of things are going to happen here as Americans have their wants and needs, but at the same time, they're not going to be able to meet them because those wants and needs have to be set aside for the greater war effort. I'll give you some specific examples. The government creates during the war something called the Office of Price Administration, and its goal was to ration. And every month you would get, as a family, one of these ration booklets. And you can see this one belongs to Cecil Andrews. And Cecil Andrews would go to his local Office of Price Administration, wherever it was. There was one over in Hanover, for example. I'm sure there was one down in York. And you would get there these little booklets, and you'd open these little booklets up. Every month you'd get a couple of them. And inside the booklets would be these little stamps that you can see here just next to my head. And in these stamps you would see certain letters and number combinations, and they would be useful for different things, like maybe wheat or coffee or butter, goods that the soldiers were needing overseas in the Atlantic, in the East, or in the West, in the Pacific. We don't want Americans buying all the coffee, for example, or shoes or gasoline when we need it for the war effort. So every family was limited with the amount that they could buy via these ration stamps and in these booklets. Americans, of course, are going to want more than just those ration booklets can provide. So you're going to see Americans planting victory gardens, for example, as a way to compensate, to grow their own food that would otherwise be rationed. Now, I'm not talking about people building coffee, planting coffee trees in their backyards, but if people could grow more of their own food, that's less that they would then be taking off the market, which could be given over to soldiers, right? Do lift less so they'll have enough, right? That's the concept here. You're going to see Americans moving, even packing up where they live. We may want to live here in PA, but maybe the war factories are going to be found in places like the South, where there's more opportunity to build factories because you have a workforce that isn't already in them. Remember, the South and the Southwest are primarily agricultural, primarily rural. Already in the North and the Northeast, we have tons of factories. If we need to produce more, well, let's build factories where there aren't any, and we can get people there to work in them. That's the idea. So you're going to see Southern California, the Southwest, the South really expand during World War II. And it still is, as a matter of fact. It's an area called the Sun Belt. People are going to be moving from up here in the Northeast to the South and Southwest to take those jobs. That's the plan anyway. Other sacrifices are financial, like war bonds, where we buy over $150 billion worth of war bonds in order to lend the government that money. And even other sacrifices are going to come in the kinds of things that we see and hear about when we have groups like the Office of War Information trying to help us understand the war so we know what sacrifices have to be made, so that we are willing to make those sacrifices for our soldiers and for the war economy.